Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Just want to talk about today the Mythic Dungeon Invitational. So if you have not heard about it, where have you been? The Mythic Dungeon Invitational is, of course, the five-man, the Mythic Dungeons, the big five-mans that are available, and they are basically a time trial tournament format where, two teams are racing against each other, starting at the exact same time, and then trying to complete the dungeon as fast as they possibly can. So not only is there the dynamic of, beating the other team, stuff like that, killing the boss first, but there also is, of course, the Mythic Dungeon style where you have to be worrying about the number of deaths that are going to be increasing the timers for each team. So, just because a team will complete it, 20 minutes after the start point, does not necessarily mean that they're first, because it depends on how many deaths that they also have to, have. So it really all kind of comes together in a very, very, very tight format in terms of making sure that you're trying to be the first team to actually complete the dungeons. So I was fortunate enough to be asked to be a caster for it. So the 3 weekends have just completed. I'm not going to spoil anything. If you want to check out the VODs, I would highly recommend them. They're on the Warcraft channel. It's linked in the description below. Definitely check them out. It was amazing. And it was very surprising just, how the formats worked or how the tournament ended up. I will say that much. Of course, you had 4 different qualified regions. You had APAC, which is Asia Pacific. It's Korea, the Australians, New Zealanders, things like that. You had, of course, China. Then you had North America and Europe. So you had 8 teams from each region going against each other in their regional tournaments. Then the top 2 teams from each region went to the global tournament, and that was this past weekend, this most recent weekend that we just had. The viewership, the response and stuff like that to the community was overwhelming. It was insane. It really just blew away any expectations I had. And it was incredible to see how many people were really tuned into it. I think at the end, I think it capped out around 57 or 58,000 viewers just for the US stream. And then, of course, there was other language streams that were going on. A lot of other channels were having other language streams. Like, I think there's about a dozen languages, I want to say. And those had thousands of viewers as well. So it was incredible. And I really love that, Blizzard put on this tournament to begin with and, gave PvE esports a shot. And, this really big proof of concept, right, that this tournament has become, and showing that, hey, people are really interested in this. So it was definitely fascinating. It was amazing being a part of. And this video, I just wanted to kind of talk about my experience, being a part of it, and I guess the people behind those esports and how they actually kind of came to be, and really the passion that they showed for the show. So for me in my position, I was one of the casters. My casting partner was Slootbag, of course. Trekkie and Rich Campbell were the other casting duo, and Rob Wing and Adrian Healingstat were 2 of the hosts. So Healingstat was there for the first weekend, and then Rob Wing was there for the second and third weekends. At first, I mean, like I said, I was a little bit intimidated, but after, I got to meet everybody, after I got to interact with everybody, it really kind of put me at ease, when we actually got on stage and stuff like that. I think the biggest amount of stage fright I had was the rehearsal day before our Chinese broadcast after the first weekend, or before the first weekend, where they were rehearsing, like, here's the top of the show, and here's where you're going to talk for, 3 to 5 minutes or something like that, and then we're going to get into the game. And at first I just, I had no idea what to say. But after a little bit, I started practicing and working with Adrian, who was the host at the time. And that really set me at ease, and it really made things a lot easier for me to be able to kind of react, because of, the way he was presenting the questions and taking his time, asking the question, that it kind of gave me more time to, prepare and be able to answer more quickly. And that was one thing, the first weekend, it made my life so much easier, because I knew that he was asking me the question, so I have to perk up and I have to pay attention, I have to make sure I'm really in tune with it. And then, second and third weekends, Rob and ask questions a little bit faster, but I was also a lot more prepared for it, and I think hopefully that showed a little bit, and hopefully I was able to kind of improve upon it, because that was one of the things that, from a casting perspective, for me, one of the big reasons I enjoyed it so much was when I picked it up. It was an enjoyable experience, and I felt like I did pretty well for first experience. And then the second and third weekends, I was able to go back to the VODs. I was able to watch myself before I went on, and try to work on how I could improve the most. And, seeing yourself improving, seeing yourself cutting out any verbose language, any, repetitive phrases and things like that. I mean, I remember, first weekend I kept saying, "Oh, no doubt," or "Oh, yeah, absolutely," and, over and over and over again. and it probably drove Sloot crazy or something like that because of how much I said it. But going on later on, I started trying to cut that down. I tried to make it as minimal as possible. And when you see the VODs, you see yourself going back to that. It definitely gives you a really good feeling because you're knowing, hey, I'm improving and I'm getting better at this. I've still got a ways to go, but when you see yourself improving, you see yourself be able to make a noticeable difference. That really feels good. And I'm definitely happy to see myself improving in that position. It was interesting as well that it was PvE esports specifically focused on Mythic Dungeons. Before when they announced the Mythic Invitational, it was about a month or two before I was asked to be a part of it. And while I was really hyped for it, I was also kind of curious why they didn't make it into a rating format, or why they didn't try to do something for rating. And this is one thing that is kind of being talked about right now, is because a lot of the balancing, not all of it, but a lot of the balancing for PvE is focused on rating, right? How are you balancing things for raids? Because previously we haven't really had this competitive dungeon format. So when you're looking at it right here is, if this is the focus for balance, and this is the popular thing in PvE, when you think of PvE, you think of rating. Why would it not be in this format? But then when you go into the Mythic Dungeon Invitational, all the teams are put into tournament realms, in their own regions. So the Koreans, Asia Pacific, and stuff like that, they have their own regions, minimal lag, stuff like that. North Americans, own region, stuff like that. So even though they're playing at the same time, they're not playing on one server. And that made it, really, really big to make sure that there's minimal lag, there's minimal competitive interference, but it also gives them, access to all the items they want. They can make whatever characters they want. They have access to all the consumables. Everything is at their disposal. It's very, very easy to put everyone at the same level. If someone runs crappy trinkets, that's their own fault, because they could have picked better trinkets. They could have theory craft better. They could have, learned more about their spec and how it reacts to items that they otherwise would not have access to, right? I mean, a lot of people were running with very early content trinkets, like Six Feathered Fan. A lot of people had unstable Arcana crystals, big surprise. I think there was a jawbone blue item there, something like that. So a lot of times, they were running with older pieces of gear that they knew would be better because it was all scaled up to a certain level. And the problem with rating is how are you going to do that in a good, clean format, right? A lot of rating is how much time are you spending on this thing, You have to look at, no doubt that the top guilds in the world are the best guilds in the world. Not doubting that, but you also have to look at the time invested for it, because there would be even tighter competition if there's a very limited amount of time that every guild had. That would be a sucky format, and I hope they never do that, but it's as an example to show that, a lot of rating can come down to time investment to improve your character, to improve the raid group, to kill the boss, right? Mythic Dungeons, yes, there's that practice element to it, but you also have to look at the time trial aspect of it, where if you're able to get everyone on the same page, everyone in the same exact format, things like that, then it's coming down to your strategy every single time. How are you executing the boss? So it requires practice completing something over and over again, rather than practice failing at something and then finally completing it, and then the big win is actually killing it, right? It's also a lot more interesting to be watching teams completing things rather than wiping for hours on end and not completing things. We've seen in the past, of course, with dungeon races, raid races, I should say, where lag, people DCing, all that stuff. You have 20 people in the raid, so it's kind of hard to make sure nobody DCs and any of that other crap. 5 people, quite a bit reduced, and I think it's also a lot more personal as a team, right? Where you're having this smaller team, this group of friends that's getting together and going to complete this dungeon, going to work on this stuff together and competing together. Also, another side effect is prize pool splits are a lot cleaner that way too. So overall, once I kind of was looking at all that and seeing more of the arguments in favor of it, I'm just like, well, it really does look like dungeons are the way to go, and they are the big format to be looking for, and they are the future, if you will. And that was one of the things that as you saw it in the tournament, you're just like, yeah, this is really, really interesting. This is very awesome that they're able to be pumping this out. But it'll be interesting to see in the future, and this is a question that's going on for the Legion QA to round out my thought here on this. It's interesting that the QA is kind of talking about utility now and how they're going to be balancing in the future. I have no idea what they're going to be doing, but when you're looking at PvP, for example, PvP, a lot of balancing, correct me if I'm wrong, is around 3v3 arena, because that's the big competitive format, which is also an esport. So it'll be interesting to see how they're going to be adjusting utility to, and also adjusting future instances as well, to say that, you know, not every instance is going to be favored for Rogue Shroud of Concealment, and maybe, you know, some other wacky abilities are going to be really strong for this dungeon and this dungeon and that dungeon, right? And that'll be interesting to see, you know, how they'll be able to build on that to make utility impactful, but also to make it more unique and specific to certain instances, rather than this thing's always good, this thing is always bad, or whatever, right? You know, you want to have good variants, and that's one thing that they've, you know, always espoused. That'll be something that's interesting to see. I wasn't too concerned about class representation, because that's stuff that's inevitably going to be happening. I mean, we didn't see any Holy Priests in there, but that was something I was not shocked by. And I think, you know, a lot of reasons are pretty self-evident, where you're saying, oh, they don't have excellent personals, they don't have effective health increases, damage reductions is a really big problem. Even if you're having, you know, effective health increases at a Desperate Prayer, well, you know, is that going to allow you to survive one-shots? And a lot of times the answer is no, right? Play Disc Priest, you know, you're still squishy, but you have absorption effects that can actually give you more of a buffer, things like that, right? So class representation, it's always going to swing up and down with balance changes. But the thing that you also have to look at is the utility. I mean, we saw tons of rogues. That was, I think, the most used class, if I'm not mistaken. So you have to look at, you know, how utility impacts it. But if this is going to be a continued event, then that's probably, I would imagine, something that they're going to look into. And, you know, how they can make the format cleaner, how they can make it, you know, push for more class representation over time. Because, you know, there's always going to be bursts, and there's always going to be metas of, like, everyone's running this, and everyone's running that, and stuff like that. You know, that's always going to happen. To wrap it up, I had an amazing time being able to, you know, be around so many talented and really passionate individuals. The crew from GCD TV, who are the admins and observers, were amazing. They, you know, the observing got better and better every week. Our communication got better and better, where we were able to talk about something. They were able to more closely focus on that with the cameras. That was amazing. The MLG staff, of course, at Columbus, Ohio, you know, the team that was working on the studio, putting on the whole event. The directors, Will and Ethan, they were amazing to work with. And of course, the WoW Esports team, Jeremy and Kyle, really, really amazing guys, super, super passionate, and they were in, you know, they've been a part of WoW for such a long time, for such a long period of time, you know, growing the game, making, you know, the game better for everyone before they were even in esports capacity, which is, you know, amazing. So they have so much investment in the game and, you know, a lot of passion for it. So always appreciate, you know, being able to work with them, and for them really asking me to be a part of it. So thanks so much for guys for watching, for tuning in, just, you know, some of my thoughts and stuff like that on the Mythic Dungeon Invitational. You know, I really appreciate everyone, you know, giving feedback. That was one of the biggest things that the, you know, Kyle and Jeremy, the WoW Esports guys, you know, were really picking up on, of how to improve the show. You know, things like healing meters being added, showing talents, showing gear, stuff like that in the final week. You know, they really busted their asses to be able to show that function, make sure that it's shown to you guys, all kinds of stuff like that. You know, it was amazing. So thank you so much, guys, for all the feedback and things like that. You know, continue to be talking about it, continue to have the interest in it. And like I said, here's hoping that there's more shows in the future, and hopefully I'll be able to, you know, get a chance to improve some more, and, you know, maybe keep on presenting it to you guys. All right. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Hope you all, you know, enjoyed the video, and I will be back with a lot more videos in the future. All right, in the near future. All right. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you all next time.